Welcome to everyone that's watching this live or will be watching or listening to this on the replay. We are very happy today to have a great conversation. And our topic today is going to be how dads can survive the current realities. And it is a challenging time for many reasons, but it's also a challenging time for fathers. So I'd like to first introduce Drew of Dad Central Ontario. He's the director of Dad Central Ontario. He's going to give you his complete name, tell a little bit about Dad Central. So Drew, I hand it off to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Ed. Honored really to have this opportunity to bring Dr. Fabiano to everyone, and to also bring everyone into a conversation about the current realities that we're all going through. My name is Drew Solon. I'm the director of Dad Central Ontario. Relatively new in this role. I started back in November. And I learned about Dad Central just last year, and I thought, wow, what an amazing resource that I don't think many people knew about. And so as I've sort of been involved, I thought, what an exciting opportunity we have to be able to engage more dads in, I think, really important conversations, because as the research continues to show, there's just so much value that an involved, responsible, and devoted father really brings to overall healthy development of children. And I think that's what Dad Central has been built on over the years that it's been operating, and trying to really help people see how important it is to work with dads, to support dads, because the value they bring to children's overall development. And so Dad Central Ontario is really excited at the opportunity to partner with Dove Men+Care because they are, like us, passionate about seeing dads embrace their roles and be engaged and connected to the people that matter most to them, and help them really show up from a place of wholeness and health. And so Dad Central Ontario is pleased to really be part of this. We're really excited that we can engage and bring people into the conversation. And we're blessed to have Dr. Fabiano here to share some of his insights today. So looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to the feedback that people have to share with us afterwards, and how we can kind of build momentum in this time to serve and support more people, more families, and more dads. So thanks a lot, Greg, for being here. Thanks a lot, Ed, for hosting.
No problem. My pleasure. The pleasure and honor is mine. And as we've mentioned a few times, Dr. Greg Fabiano is with us. I could introduce him and tell you all the wonderful things he's all about and that he does, but I'm going to let him share a little bit about himself before we get involved in the conversation. So he's given me permission to call him Greg. So Greg, welcome, and please share a little bit about yourself with the audience.
Hey everybody, real delight to be here. I'm currently a professor at Florida International University, but worked for about the last 20 years at the University of Buffalo, just south of Ontario. And I got interested in working with dads. I did a lot of work with kids who were having challenging behaviors or who were in preschool, and we did a number of parenting programs to support the parents of those children. And one of the things we noticed, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, was that we weren't doing as good a job as we could engaging and involving dads and men in our work. And so we did a lot of kind of digging. We had some focus groups, and we talked with parents about why that might be. And one of the things that came up quite frequently is that the men we were working with didn't want to sit in a room and just have someone like me talk to them for 2 hours. They really wanted to be engaged with their children in activities. And that was different than the model we were using. So we created a sports Little League program. We call it the Coaches Program, where the men spend some time learning strategies that can be helpful for promoting positive behavior. And then they get an opportunity to practice those strategies immediately with their kids in a soccer Little League game or a T-ball Little League game. We've even used the program to incorporate shared book reading with the dads and their children. And our programs have shown really nice outcomes. Not only engage the dads we're working with, they're improving the parenting strategies that they're using, and even some of the kids' long-term outcomes later, their early literacy skills in the shared book reading program, their social skills in our recreational program. And I've had a long time interest in working with dads, and I'm really interested in the topic today to figure out how maybe some of the lessons we've learned in our work can be applied to this new reality we were all thrust into just a few weeks ago. And I should also mention I'm a dad of 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So I have a little bit of street credibility, and that I'm trying to manage the same issues I think everybody is right now.
Okay, well, that's fantastic, Greg. And again, I'd like to thank the Dove Men+Care team and the Edelman PR team for introducing us to you and the great work that you're doing. So we're going to get into some Q&A that's going to be between myself, Drew, and Greg. Also, if you have any questions and you're online right now, please type them in the chat room. We'll certainly be doing a round of Q&A after the main conversation, but please feel free to type any questions or comments, and we will do our best before this conversation ends to make sure those questions or comments are addressed. So my first question, Greg, it's in regards to stress. Many dads are currently spending more time at home in light of the social distancing policies in place. Because of this, fathers are adapting their schedules to ensure that they're able to balance being an involved father, and continuing to manage their careers, manage the stress of losing their job potentially, or being an essential worker at this time. This new reality can cause undue stress on parents. How can parents manage stress during great times of uncertainty, and how does it affect their children?
That's a great question, Ed. I think maybe one thing to think about first is to reflect upon how we usually would manage transitions like this. If I were taking a vacation, I would probably have to start planning a month or 2 months in advance. I would talk with my colleagues and coworkers about what needed to be covered. I'd think about what would need to happen in the interim. I'd also be preparing in my family, right? I'd be thinking about, well, what do I need to have prepared for my kids to do, and make sure that the tablet was maybe updated with the latest operating system so it wouldn't crash when they tried to do something on the car ride. That's completely different than what just happened to us, where immediately people got the news that we're going to change really the whole way we do life. And on top of that, we have the general stress that we all experience watching the news and wondering when's the next shoe going to drop and what's coming next. And our children who are in school are moving to remote instruction, and that has its own set of stressors associated with them, trying to figure out what all these teachers are wanting us to do. And I think it's important, first of all, to acknowledge we are all stressed, that and there's really no way to get out of that in the short term. But I think maybe the most important message I'd want to convey is that our kids are very sensitive to the stress we experience as parents. Even when we try to hide it or we don't want them to know what's going on, the kids almost have a super sense to know that something's off or something's not quite right. And as dads especially, and moms, I think that we have to be knowledgeable about that, and then be sure that we're conveying to the kids some sense of security. Like even if we don't feel like we have it, the message we want to send to the kids is that we do, and we want to do our best to support them, answer their questions if they're showing signs of stress or they have questions about what's going on. I don't think there's an advantage to hiding it, because the fact that they're asking a question about it means they're already thinking about it. And so at a developmentally appropriate level, we want to try to let them know that we have it as parents and we're helping keep them safe and secure. And that's not really something that they have to worry a lot about, and kind of let the kids off the hook.
Okay, fantastic. And we had a little bit of a technical difficulty in regards to audio. I think it's resolved now. So what we're doing is we're going to be having, I'm just going to repeat again, we're going to be having a Q&A between myself, Drew, and Greg. And then if at the end of our conversation, questions will be tabled, please type your questions in the chat so we can address them to our best ability before this conversation is over. Drew, I know you wanted to add on to that first conversation piece, so please do.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Greg, for that. I think that's really important. You know, in having conversations with a few dads, and as we're trying to navigate, you know, the uncertainty and the reality of what we're going through, I had a particular conversation with a single dad. And so he has, and he also has an only child. So an only child, single dad, limited interaction, obviously, with the social distancing, and, you know, limited in terms of his two-year-old's ability to really engage in some of the video chat that might normally connect some of us at a time like this. And so he was coming at it from two places. One was will this limited social interaction for my son, for maybe 3, 4, 5 months, will that have any potential negative developmental effects on him? And that's really wanted to know, is like, what can I do to help with that? And then I guess the other side is, what's a solution, or what would I do? What can I do as an individual father, knowing that he's going to have very limited social interactions, to be able to help support his development at this stage? So wondering if you could share any thoughts or insights, maybe to assuage his fears or help him know and understand how the developmental process works at that age, plus then maybe possible solution for him to figure out how can I engage my son in that social development piece.
That's a great question. One of the things probably that I think about first in reaction to that is that the primary concern of everybody right now should be getting through this immediate crisis that the whole world is experiencing. And one of the great things about children that we know from lots of research is that they are incredibly resilient. So some of the concerns we might have as adults when we're jumping forward to weeks or months or years ahead of time, children, to their benefit, just think about right now. And if you have a young child, a 2-year-old or 3-year-old in the home, and they are getting one-on-one time with dad, from their perspective, this might be the best thing that ever happened to them. They're not having the same concerns or worries that that parent is having. And of course, I wouldn't discount the dad's concerns about his child's social development. But if we take a long-term view, it's likely that the child's going to have opportunities to catch up or make up, especially at 2 years old, some of these limitations that we're all having to experience right now. And the health and safety of the child is the #1 concern. Those socialization concerns, are appropriately lower on the ladder. Ed, I think you're on mute.
I am muted. Sorry about that, everyone. Definitely, we just want to move on to our next conversation point. So what are some of the key themes and actions parents can take to maintain their family time?
So one of the things parents can do immediately, this is today's suggestion, or maybe tomorrow if you're not doing it today, is to come up with a list of routines, a daily schedule, and put some structure on the day. Now that some of our everyday routines have been disrupted, I think we're all learning how much we were kind of doing the same thing at the same time every day. And that predictability created a sense of safety and security, not only for us as families, but also for the children. And when that was taken away, what could happen is some bad habits could form, right? People might sleep in later. Children might start to say, I'll do my schoolwork later because my teacher doesn't check it till the next day. I'll do it tonight. But a negative side effect of that approach is that the security that comes along with the routine is lost. So the best recommendations right now are that you try to keep the school day like a regular school day. Children get up at a regular time, they get dressed, they don't stay in their pajamas all day, they would have a breakfast at the time they would normally have it, and then they start their school day like they normally would and end it when they normally would. Schoolwork shouldn't be going long into the evening either. The other thing in a stressful time like this that is really important is the communication from a dad or a mom to a child. And the communication when people are stressed sometimes veers more towards negative things like I need this done, or a lot of commands, demands, reprimands, corrections, those kinds of things, especially when we're all cooped up in one room with the same people for lots of days in a row, right? Everybody's going to get on one another's nerves. So it's kind of the discipline we have to have as parents to remember, we have to catch the kids being good. If they're just quiet for 10 seconds, that's a win. We want to comment on that. I appreciate the way you're letting me do this webinar for the next hour without an interruption. And I'm delighted I haven't had an interruption yet. Maybe if they're working hard on their work independently and not asking you for guidance every couple seconds, you notice that. I really like the way that you're finishing that work on your own. You're showing me you're a really big girl and you're doing a good job with your studies today. Or that was great the way you put your dishes in the sink after breakfast. I didn't even have to ask you. Thanks for pitching in and helping out around the house. So those kinds of strategies can go a long way with kids. And the more you do that, the more you're investing in positive future interactions, because now the kids are expecting that they're going to be noticed and going to get the parents' attention for being accountable and being helpful. The last thing I would say about this, and then I'd be curious to see what you think too, Ed, is choose your battles. People are going to get on one another's nerves. You can't play a game of whack-a-mole where all day you're just going after your kid with do this, stop that, knock it off, quit it, don't stop, no, don't quit. That's going to just create a pattern where the kids are going to keep doing things you don't like. You're going to keep telling them to knock it off, and then they're going to do more of those things you don't like, and before you know it, everybody's miserable. So we're the adults in the room. We can decide what we just want to attend to and what we don't want to attend to. And I encourage everybody on the call, if they have a kid, think about what's something that they do that annoy me that I'm not going to mention today. I'm just going to ignore it and move on, and notice how that might help change things in a more positive direction.
I think that's great in what you're saying. I want to go give an interesting situation and then see how you address it, because we do have single fathers that are home with children. So the ideal situation is you have two parents and they can divide up the time. But what if there's a single father and also maybe has a child or children that are doing school at home? How would you give suggestions or approaching that type of situation?
We know from lots of research that it's just simply harder to be a single parent. You have a lot more responsibility. You have to be accountable for a lot more, and you really have to be on your game 100% of the time. And so some of these strategies can help. A schedule and a routine reduces the amount of times a parent has to think about what's coming next, and the child has to think about what's coming next, and it reduces the overall number of commands or instructions that have to be given. If the things are laid out, the child will, in short order, get used to doing those things. If there is a single parent, it might be important to schedule in some independent time where the kids are expected to do some free play on their own, and give the parent a couple, 15 minutes might even be worth it to just collect their thoughts and replenish their energy for the next interaction they might have to have. The other thing that's really important, I think, for single parents and all parents is, from our perspective as adults, I think we're all stressed. We're all waiting for this to be over. We're saying this has been an incredible adjustment for the family. But from the kid's perspective, this might not necessarily be the worst thing. And a parent can really reconceptualize this as a time to improve the bond that they have with their child, and make sure to be spending some positive times. This whole time in the world is a little bit of a time where we have an excuse to not do things perfectly. We can give ourselves permission to do some things just good enough, and so that we can focus on the most important things, like keeping our family safe, getting through the day with a positive attitude, making sure our kids are continuing to develop and grow within the constraints that we have right now. Excellent.
Drew, any questions you want to add on to about some things that actions parents can take for Greg?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I also resonated with quite a few things that he was sharing there as he went through. I'm a scheduled person. I like the schedule, I like the routine, I like the idea of it. But what I've found in my own family in particular is sometimes the kids don't necessarily buy into my schedule or my routine or the routine that my wife and I want to have. So, maybe my first question is, how do you deal with, you want to establish a routine, you do the right things to maybe even establish that, but you're getting this huge resistance, or there's challenges that are coming up in the process of wanting to do that to keep some normalcy through this uncertain time. What suggestions would you have to the parent who wants to do that but isn't being successful, maybe?
One thing to think about is good routines and good schedules in an all-day home situation probably don't include all of the really tough things that you got to get done bundled up together right at the beginning, right? That's just going to cause some friction. The kids aren't going to want to do it. One idea is to build in some positive parent time that is a fun part of the schedule. And in these times, they're not demanding. For example, you ask your child, what do they want to do? And maybe even if you're not really super wild about building the Lego set you've already built 10 times before, if that's what your child chooses, that's what you're going to do. If they want to play tag in the living room, you could safely do that. that might be something that you're able to do. And your job as a parent in those times of the schedule is to let the child lead. They choose. You're not demanding or commanding what they're supposed to do. You kind of get rid of the words no, don't, stop, or quit. You don't ask them questions. For little ones, questions are demanding. I don't know if anybody's ever had the experience of introducing their child to a coworker or a family member they haven't seen in a while, and the first thing that adult does is, oh, how old are you? What grade are you in? What do you like to do? And your kids clam up and you're super embarrassed. Well, that's because kids have a hard time generating thoughtful responses to all those rapid fire questions. We can do that as adults because we've answered them thousands or hundreds of thousands of times. But for a little one, it takes a lot of effort to figure out, I don't know, let me think about that grade. I don't often think about it that way. My parent does all that thinking for me. So when you're playing games, you don't ask, why are you moving the person in that direction? Why'd you make that choice? You use a play-by-play announcer approach. Like, oh, that's an interesting decision you made. You're gonna go backwards 3 steps. I can't wait to see what you're gonna do next. And that way you're engaging with your child, but you're not demanding on your child.
Great. I like the play-by-play announcer analogy. I find that to be really valuable because by nature, I'm more of a question asker. And my kids do and I'm their dad, my kids do exactly that. So the play-by-play is something that my wife and I have been learning, and I'm trying to, incorporate a little bit more. So I really appreciate the analogy. The other thing I think about as we have been starting to receive, emails and emails and emails from the schools about, the requirements now and expectations as our children are going to be out of school for a while. And if you have school-age children, this may be something dad is experiencing or parents are experiencing. And there's an element of what I've observed, some pressure the parents might be feeling to, get all this work done. And now there's actually requirements of, for us, we've got to take some photos of our children actually doing some of the work. So I guess my question to you is, what suggestions would you have for, and it could be, so in my situation, I'm doing most of the working from home. My wife is, fielding the schooling, but I've also seen dads who it's the opposite, where dad is at home and he's handling the schooling. He's not a teacher. He doesn't feel equipped, and he's feeling the pressure and getting, almost driven a little bit nuts by trying to navigate all these things and feeling just not capable. What are your, I guess, recommendations or suggestions for either of those scenarios? You're a dad, you need to support your partner, or your dad who's on the front lines working through the schooling and you need some support just yourself. What would you say to those parents?
I think that just like families have been struck by the abruptness of this change across society, schools are in the same boat. I have a lot of empathy for the teachers that all of a sudden one day we're told you need to take your whole curriculum and turn it into online teaching and make sure you're continuing to give students A+ instruction across all these subject areas. And let's be honest, the schools one day before that were not equipped to do that and weren't planning to do that. And so to some degree, I think we're all feeling overwhelmed because we're getting emails or texts or messages through different learning operating systems to manage all kinds of different subjects for our kids who also aren't used to doing this sort of thing. So it's kind of like a situation where assignments are coming down the pike. We all have to do them, but we're not sure how to do them. And so it creates stress. And I think that's maybe the heart of your question is, how do we manage the stress related to it? I make one recommendation first. If the parents are able to see the information about the assignments before the child's even involved, to try to get themselves organized, to create an outline of, okay, well, here's what the messages say we need to do. Here are the things I know we can tackle, like we can read this book, or I can ask my child to read this book. Here are some things I don't understand, like how am I going to get my child into a Google Classroom when I'm not sure what the password is? And triage. If there's things that you can easily delegate to your child to work on, get them started on that first. One thing that's clear is the deadlines are a lot more flexible in a situation like this than they might be if a child was in a 45-minute class and everything had to be finished by the bell ringing. The other thing I would say, if a parent's feeling stressed, they should absolutely reach out to the teacher in the school. They want to help. If they're not getting feedback about people having difficulties, they might just continue to do the same things that create difficulties. If they get some feedback that they understand the parents aren't able to manage or supervise the tasks that they're assigning, they may also modify or change their approach to things. And so I'd start with the adults first, the parents working together, the parents working with teachers. But then with the child, everybody's child's different. I work with a lot of children with learning challenges. I know how hard it is for them to get through some of the work in a classroom with lots of supports. I honestly don't think that they're going to be able to do all the work assigned to them in a home without professionals supporting them. And so that's another place where I would encourage working with the teacher to adjust the expectations and make sure that the child is producing and getting academic content that they can do. But also, I think we all have to manage our expectations a little bit in terms of the next few months, what we were hoping to get out of this situation. Everybody's doing their best, and that is good enough. If you can look in the mirror and say you're doing the best, I think we should be okay with that for the short term.
Okay. Anything else from you, Drew?
Oh, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on. I know Greg, you've talked a little bit about it in your previous comments, but I really want to focus on the father here now. And my question would be, as more fathers may be working from home during this time, what advice would you give fathers to be able to effectively manage work life and dad life during this unprecedented time we're going through right now?
I would say, number one, you have to make sure the kids are adequately cared for. And if anywhere has to give, it's probably going to have to be some of the work responsibilities if you have to make sure your family is secure and safe. That if you're confident that that's the case, then I think most people want to stay professional and productive. And I bet a lot of people on the call today have learned about Zoom or some of these other approaches to remote communication. This is the first time I've used Zoom the last couple of weeks. I use it all the time now. And so I'm learning about new technologies frequently. And I'm also trying to convey to my boss the limitations I have. There are a few things that I was working on that I simply can no longer do now that I'm not allowed to be in the office, and I've negotiated some different deadlines and some different expectations related to that. I have a number of employees that I'm making sure to communicate with them the expectations I have with the change here, and I'm listening to what they're saying to me about the challenges that they're having. I would encourage any dad that was feeling stress in the professional setting to communicate. I think by and large, people are being very understanding that this is a different time with different expectations. In terms of being a good father, you might have to make some compromises with work, maybe shifting a schedule of things that you have to do to complete those after the child is asleep in bed, and maybe leaving some of the afternoon time open so that you can give your full attention to a little one who's going to demand it, whether you're willing to give it to them or not. I would say if you have a daily schedule, making sure to have a lunch break where the family gets together and sits down for lunch and reviews what's going on in the morning and plans ahead for the rest of the afternoon. I also think all the parents and all the dads should be understanding that families everywhere are going through the same challenges. If you're feeling like you're all alone and you're isolated, you're not. That we're kind of all in this together, and we're all going to get through this together.
Okay. Drew, anything you want to add on to that? I think Drew's on me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive a little bit deeper on that. So with the fathers, like if there's a father online here, I won't call him out by name, but one of the nice things that he basically has a routine from 9 to 5 for what he's going to be doing with his family. Do you like that suggestion?
I think there can be a lot of benefits to a routine like that. One, from the child's perspective, it creates security. When a child knows what to expect next, they feel secure. And if you don't think that's true, I would challenge you to go to any preschool class in the country, every single question from the children is, when's lunch? When do I go home? When's lunch? When do I go home? Right? That they want to know when those benchmarks are happening. If you create a schedule, you help the child understand lunch is right after we finish our reading together. And so then they'll know when we get to that point, that's coming next. And the outdoor time is going to be right after chores are done. And once the chores are done, we're going to go outside. That predictability is really helpful for kids, but it's also helpful for parents, because if you have a good schedule in place, you don't have to spend a lot of your limited mental energy thinking about what are we going to do when and what's going to come next and how am I going to keep the kids occupied. The schedule does that for you. And so I would say in most cases, that's a good strategy. Now, the only thing I would say also is give yourself permission to be flexible. It's okay if it's a rainy day, you might have to change some of the activities you had planned for that time or that area. You might have to do something a little longer, and that's okay too. But if you tell the kids ahead of time, this is what's going to happen, that helps them understand where the changes are and makes their world more predictable. And this isn't, frankly, an unpredictable world in the last few weeks. And anywhere we can get some predictability, I think that's a win for the family.
Excellent. Another thing that we shared before we went live in your notes is about speaking to your boss or your colleagues to manage expectations during this time, because you obviously want to balance your work and balance your family. Could you speak a little bit onto that?
Sure. One of the things I really liked about my employer the few weeks before everybody was put on remote work is they sent out a survey to everybody to find out who did have children that would be impacted if the schools were no longer in session and it went to home instruction. And we were given a lot of thought to how's that going to impact day-to-day operations. I think most businesses are aware that this is an enormous task to tackle, over 100% care of children and 100% attention to your employment. And bosses and supervisors are sensitive to the fact that, and many of them are in the same boat, that business as usual, it has to change a little bit. And I would say requesting later deadlines, requesting different times for meetings or calls are generally received well. And you have to ask. The worst somebody could say is no, we can't do that. But most people, I think, are in the mindset of being as accommodating as they can be.
Excellent. Fantastic. Drew?
Yeah, there's only one quick thing I wanted to ask about and get your perspective. So I happen to reach out and connect with a couple other friends of mine who are also dads. But I also recognize that that doesn't always happen. And dads can sometimes feel quite isolated. You talked about the idea of that we're all going through these same challenges. Can you, I don't know, what's your opinion on the value of being able to interact and engage with another dad or another group of dads sort of through this time to help support? Is there value in that, or is there not?
Well, one thing I would critique is the use of the term social distancing. I think that's the wrong term. It should be physical distancing, right? We're supposed to stay apart to protect one another from the spread of the virus, but it should absolutely not reduce socialization. I think, and there's lots of mechanisms to do that, right? Social media is one way you can connect with friends or family members. There's ways that, an example I did with my own children is I had them mail a letter to a friend, which little kids often don't receive mail. Our house is just bills. If a kid receives a card or a letter in the mail, it's often a thrill. And that's a way they can connect with some of their schoolmates that they haven't been able to be with recently. You might see people in the neighborhood, at least even a friendly wave is something nice, just to connect briefly with somebody who's not locked in your household with you. And I think that is critical. Isolation is not the answer to getting through the difficulties we're in socially. It's the physical isolation that we should be focused on. And so people should be reaching out.
Great, thank you. Ed, you're on mute.
Doing too many things at once, folks. Sorry about that, trying to multi-purpose. My next conversation piece with Greg and also with Drew is, what are some of the tips or activities you can share with fathers that ensures they're able to make the most of bonding moments with their children during this uncertain time? I know you've highlighted some of them, but maybe if you could expand, that'd be great.
Well, fathers are the leaders of their family oftentimes, and or they're co-leading. And one of the things that is really important is setting a tone, one that's positive, one that's enthusiastic, one that might be joking around a little bit, and letting kids know that this is a fun place to be, and this is going to be a positive day right off the bat. Getting them out of bed, getting them up for breakfast, engaging with them, telling them about the schedule for the day, building in fun activities into that schedule, like might be a thrill for school-age kids to see, well, okay, I got to do my math worksheets from 9 to 10. At 10 o'clock on the schedule, it says we're going into the living room for a dance party, and we're going to play all of our favorite songs and dance for 15 minutes. That could be part of your schedule. That's going to be fun, something to look forward to. And then they might go back to work after that. But you're building in breaks just like the teachers do in schools, right? There's no case where a teacher says you have to sit and do academic work for 6 hours straight. They have enrichment special activities like phys ed or art or music or maybe a technology class. They have recess. They have times where they're interacting with other people. You might also think about sports as a way to bond. You might not be able to go down to the park and shoot a basketball, but you can get a trash can and some rolled up socks and play basketball on your kitchen floor. You could use household items for crafts. One great thing is that the internet has been up this whole time, and there are an enormous number of websites that have ways you can use household objects to make different arts or crafts activities that will be really fun for kids and different. One of the suggestions is the old game of playing lava, where you play pillows on the ground for kids to jump off. I know Canada's own Justin Bieber just had some kind of millions of number of views doing that same thing, and probably introducing that game to a whole generation of kids that grew up on tablets and maybe not doing those sorts of things as often around their home. You can build forts out of cushions from your couch. There's all kinds of things that can happen that would be real treats for the kids because they've not experienced those things before, and their dad can introduce them to these fun activities. If the weather's nice, most communities are still allowing a walk or playing in the yard or the driveway, and that would be a nice thing to do too, to mix things up during the day. Excellent. In all of those activities, you want to use the same strategies we talked about earlier. Catch your child being good. Use the play-by-play narrative, not a lot of questioning. Throw out the words no, don't, stop, or quit if you can, because you want the kids to enjoy this. And as a parent, you're investing in this positive activity with your children, because you know you're going to have to go back to that kitchen table and tell them to do the math worksheet later. But if it's in the context of these fun things happening throughout the day, those interactions are going to go better as time goes on.
Excellent. Anything you want to add to that at all? You're good? Excellent. All right, let's go on further in regards to that. And another point we want to have you speak to, Greg, is how can dads make the best of being at home with their children, family? How can dads take advantage of this situation in a small way?
So one of the things every dad could do is have a goal of each day spending at least 10 minutes working on the bond with their child or their children. And that would mean carving out some time to close the laptop, put away the phone, put down the newspaper, and really spend some time interacting with their child in a child-directed way. The whole rest of the day is probably going to be parent-directed, or many parts of it will be. But this is where memories are going to be made. I saw an interesting comment early on when this all started, where it said, from the adult's point of view, what's happening in the world? Am I going to be safe? Is my family going to be safe? Or what's going to happen with my job? All sorts of worries and stresses and concerns. And then it said, from the child's point of view, this is looking back as they were young adults. That was a great time where my mom or my dad or my parent was at home. They did all kinds of fun activities with me. They helped me with my schoolwork and helped me learn some new things. And they really showed me in a clear way that they cared about me and they were going to keep me safe and secure. And I think that's an important thing for all of the dads to keep in mind, that that's what they're really doing now. They're sending a message that you're loved, you're cared for, you're safe, you're secure, and we're going to get through this. And that's what the kids are going to remember when we're on the other side of this. It's the parents' job to do all the worrying and have all the stress. It's the kids' job to benefit from the parent doing that for them.
Excellent. Do you want to add anything? You're good? All right. So that's the formal part of the conversation between myself, Greg, and Drew. And we have a few moments for questions. There have been some questions in the chat that I'm going to address. One or two comments I'm just going to read here. John is saying, because we have been thrown into uncertainty, dads can be experiencing significant stress, anxiety over the changes. He says, how can dads use this as a means of modeling healthy skills children can rely on as they grow into adults? This is a great opportunity for dads to shine at a time when most dads are viewed in a negative light. So I think he does have a question there saying, how can dads use this as a means of modeling healthy skills children? So what would your response be to that, Greg?
Well, one thing dads can do in this situation is show their children appropriate self-care, right? In a stressful time, you can do things like exercise. You can do that, many exercises along with your child, or they'll see you exercising and taking care of yourself. That's part of good self-care. Eating healthy, making good choices. There's an opportunity every time that dad goes to the refrigerator or the pantry to tell their child why they're having a piece of fruit now for a snack instead of those delicious potato chips that are also in the cabinet next door. Modeling how to talk to other people is a way dads can help build a foundation for managing stressful or difficult situations. And that comment is really well taken. This is a situation that's going to be very memorable, and kids can either remember feeling not safe or it wasn't a good situation, or they can remember my dad really stepped up to the plate and took care of me, and I'm grateful for that. And I think we all want to be having our children think about the latter.
Excellent. And just to go a little bit deeper on what you were saying, and you touched a little bit on it in your most recent response, what about self-care and mental health for dads during this time? What are the things dads need to do to cope with the new realities of life from an emotional, especially emotional perspective?
So it would be unusual if someone was experiencing no stress in this situation. So relaxation strategies like deep breathing or progressive muscle relaxation are things people can do in their home to help themselves relax, get their body relaxed. There may be some people, however, that the mental health concerns rise above the sorts of things that you can manage on your own, or maybe the toolbox doesn't have all the tools that are required for this situation. And in those cases, I would say it's not inappropriate. Nobody should be embarrassed to reach out to their primary care physician and ask if there are other resources or tools that they can access that might be helpful. There's a number of telehealth supports that may be available, and reaching out to friends or family members can also be a way to get the social support that's needed if somebody's feeling particular stress in a particular time. That's a kind of a middle ground that is an important one to acknowledge as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I see one here from Brian Souza. Says he's got a question specifically. He's like, I've got 3 kids, boys, a boy that's 10, a daughter that's 8, and a boy that's 6. I work in construction, and one of our sites is still open, and my daughter has been asking if I can catch COVID. I told her that Daddy's being safe, but I'm getting afraid that she is getting scared and thinking of staying home. I wanted to get your perspective and opinions on that, Greg.
So I won't be able to speak to anybody's particular situation, but I would say as children are asking about the COVID-19, as they're hearing about it or becoming aware of it, I would meet children where they are with their questions. And this is going to vary based on their developmental level, of course. You know, how you talk to a 5-year-old will be different than a 10-year-old will be different than a 15-year-old. But I would be honest with kids. There's no reason to sugarcoat or push off their questions. In a situation where a parent has to go to work, I would be honest and say, yeah, there is a possibility anybody can catch this virus. That's why everybody's taking extra precautions and being extra safe. Maybe explain some of the precautions or the safety measures that the employer is putting in place for how to work safely. And what personal precautions the person is taking to work safely or be safe. And then ultimately it becomes a personal decision on where you want to set the bar in terms of your own tolerance for safety and your family's tolerance for safety.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I would be honest. I think the bottom line is I would be honest and straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just some comments here. Frederick from Quebec, I believe, says there are additional supports on the site of the Child Development Institute based in Toronto. They run the national expansion to 100 new sites of the SNAP program with funds available. Stop Now and Plan is for children with emotional regulation issues. And if you're in the chat, he gives the link of the website. And he also likes how Greg said, I like the distinction, physical distancing and not social distancing. So he definitely likes that. Have another comment here from Julie saying, dads can also check out Early On sites and seek ideas and tips. Fort Erie Early On will be hosting live videos and activities to help parents out with the young ones. A question here, Alexandra is asking, can you offer any guidance for single dads who may not have a support system directly in the home?
Yeah, that's a good question. To some degree, you're going to have to play the hand you're dealt if to get through the immediate crisis. So I would, in cases like that, I would take things day by day. I would figure out what am I going to do tomorrow and how am I going to manage to get through this day. And I would, the other recommendation would be simultaneously try to figure out how to increase that support network. Program like Dad Central is one, and there are other support systems like that might be, if you reach out, most of the programs are more than happy to try to figure out how to troubleshoot or problem solve what might be going on. This is also a time where connecting with the school might be helpful. So if some of the support is related to what's going on with educational demands, connecting with the teacher would be okay. And again, I would say the main marching orders right now are do the best you can to keep your family safe and to get through this. And then there will be time to rebuild and re-examine some of these things going forward.
Okay.
I know it's not the best answer, but that's the best we're probably able to do.
All right. So we're starting to wind it down again. If you have any final comments or questions, please get them in. We're going to start winding it down momentarily. So Greg, first of all, can you just give us just an overview, just a little recap of what you've shared with our audience live and also via replay, and just some tips that you may not have had a chance to share with us via the question period that you'd like to add?
So this is a stressful time. It's a tough time for families. This is a chance for dads to rise to the challenge and really help their child, support their child, make sure to facilitate their child's continued growth. I hope the takeaways might be create a schedule and a routine and a sense of predictability and safety for your child. Catch your child being good. You're cooped up, you're going to get more time to observe your child's behavior than maybe their whole entire life. Look and watch them carefully, and if you see something you like, comment on it. It was nice the way you handled that with your sister. I really like the way that you picked up the one toy before you started playing with the other toy. Choose your battles. You can't be on top of your child all day for everything. Think about the important things. You might have to give directions about that, but then let the other things, at least in the short term, slide. And make sure you spend some child-directed time, and this includes teens too. Really engage with them, let them lead the activity, and you're along for the ride as their parent to support them and to create a positive relationship with them. But this is the time of day where you're not demanding them to do something.
Okay, we just got another question in, and I want to make sure we get everyone's questions in. Dana is asking, how can you get teens to buy into the schedule?
if you have teens are a unique category in their own right. And so some of the teens I know, their day-to-day hasn't changed very much at all because they like to stay in their room and they're hooked into their electronics and they're doing a lot of things independently. The way to engage teens is not a whole lot different with kids, but the style might have to be a little bit different. There are things that can be positive consequences for teens, just like there are for little ones. And the best strategy for teens is to say, when you finish the less preferable activity, then you get to do the more preferable activity. If you want to be playing a video game, you got to finish your schoolwork, just like we would do in a school day. And there might be a little static or friction that you get when you put a demand like that on a teen, but if you stick to the schedule and you stick to the plan, most will get with the program eventually, or at least they'll get with the program fairly well. And with some teenagers, that's as good as you're going to get, that's good enough. And again, you're trying to get through what is a difficult time for everybody.
Okay, excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions. So
there was, sorry, Ed, there was one question before, and it was more around, let me just get to it, that we didn't quite address, but I think it'd be worthwhile just to quickly see if we can touch on it. So let's say we've got a network of a lot of organizations who support dads. And so do you have any, key suggestions for people who are already running programs or how to support dads a little bit better remotely? I know it's not necessarily your expertise, but if we're all in this sort of scenario, do you have any thoughts that they can look to help those people who are in community groups or coordinators trying to serve dads better through this time?
You want to start with this one, Ed, or?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I would say one of the things, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So one of the things that we're going to learn through this whole process is what worked and what didn't. And I hope that we're all going to take some time afterwards to look back and make a list of, here were the pluses, these are the things that worked, and here are the minuses. These things kind of weren't as supportive or weren't as helpful. And collecting good data as we go along on engagements with dads, feedback that we receive from dads, and looking and seeing how our programs operate is going to be really important in making us bigger and better and stronger going forward. And so my hope is that everybody's got their ears open. They're listening to the dads that are communicating with them. If there's gaps that are being identified, we're working hard to reduce those gaps. And we're innovating and we're thinking about new ways to do old work. And that work's going to have to continue to be done. Hopefully that's what's going on in all these organizations. And I know it is because I follow and talk to a lot of people in these organizations.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it may not have been exactly fair, but it's kind of an important piece of why we're doing what we're doing today, right? From the Dad Central perspective, is that we want to be a resource and support and do it in a way that everyone can access. So right now we're doing the conversation, but we're also recording it. We are hosting it live on Facebook, so it's accessible to anyone. And so using some of the tools that are available to us as community service organizations, and there are a lot of them are free or relatively free. You can at least make it accessible to people. And I think that's your point of the necessity as the mother of all invention, is that there are ways, there are tools. And so for us at Dad Central, we're grateful for the opportunity to do this, but we want to continue to do more of this. And we want to be both a resource for those who serve dads, but also a resource for dads as well. And so anyways, I wanted to mention that as well, as we're going to continue to try and serve those who serve as well.
Excellent. I am done. Drew, if you want to close, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, Greg, thank you so much for your time, for being involved and sharing your wisdom and insight. Thank you so much, Ed, for facilitating this conversation. From Dad Central's perspective, we are again very excited to have the partnership with Dove Men+Care to help further the conversations, to engage dads in their roles, and to be able to provide updated resources and insights. Greg, some of your work has been fantastic and foundational in engaging dads more and helping them see the results in terms of their children. So we're looking to continue to build more resources as a result to help dads. we've built from Dad Central's perspective a little bit of a new website to be able to engage and resource organizations and dads. And so we're hoping to see you continue to check in with us, but also give us feedback. So as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to state again a thank you to Edelman for their contributions and support. And let you know that anyone who's been on this call, we're looking to get some feedback from you in terms of how we can continue to support you maybe in future calls like this, and maybe more focused on particular topics. We're going to send out a survey to everyone. We'd really love your feedback in answering some of the questions on the survey. Relatively short, but it'll help us develop our planning. I think at that stage, I want to tell you we're going to be sending out a resource that recaps Greg's points today so that you can use it either for yourself or you can circulate it and make it available to anyone who might need some support at this time who may not have been able to access the call. So that will also be coming out as well for everyone. And I think for my point, that's all that I have at this stage, unless I missed anything.
I have one more thing I want to add. Website address, dadcentral.ca.
Yes, thank you. Yes, dadcentral.ca, lots of resources. We'll be able to access all the things we talked about.
All right, well, Greg, Drew, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who attended live. This will be in the near future available on replay. And please engage with us and please engage with our fathers. They need us and we need them. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care.